Good morning, you guys. This is Crystal here from Homemaking on the Homestead, and today I want to talk to you guys about pantry items. I've done videos on this before, but today I've got a little bit of a twist to it. And while I'm doing that, I am going to be baking some pumpkin muffins. I had some pumpkin still left over from the big can that I opened when I made some pumpkin bars, which I shared in the last video. And so I just decided to do something simple like pumpkin bars. You guys gave me some great ideas. There was pumpkin bagels and pumpkin scones and pumpkin rolls, and I was like, whoa, all of it sounds great. I'd love to do all of it. But this morning's kind of a gray, overcast day. We've had a lot of rain. There's more rain in the forecast, and I thought, you know, I am just going to make myself a pot of tea and bake some muffins and talk to you guys about pantry items. So what makes this video just a little bit different is that I am going to be sharing what I think are my top 10 pantry items. Now, these are not groups. These are just 10 individual items that I feel like are an absolute must-have in my pantry. I would be really interested if you share your top 10. What are your top 10 items that you must have always in your pantry? If you could share those below in the comments, I would appreciate that. I am also going to share my top 10 spices. What are the spices that I feel are the most important and the most versatile? With the way things are going nowadays, you know, there's just so much uncertainty. I hear of food shortages, I hear of fuel shortages, I hear of all these things. I could get really stressed. I choose not to. But I do like to be prepared because I think that's just being part of a good homemaker, is to always be prepared. You know, she watches over the ways of her household, and that includes being prepared for things should they happen. If they don't happen, that's okay. You know, with winter coming, of course, it's easy to get snowed in around here, or, you know, to deal with power outages or whatever. So it's good to have a supply of things on my pantry shelf that I can create all kinds of meals from if I can't get to the grocery store. Okay, I'm going to start these muffins, and then I'm going to be back to you with my top 10. Okay, the first batch is in the oven. This recipe makes 2 dozen, and don't worry, I'll leave the recipe below in case you want to give it a try. These are really good. I've made these. It's one of my older recipes that I have made for years for my family. But anyway, let's talk about those top 10 necessary pantry items. And now this comes from a perspective of cooking from scratch. So everything I make, I cook from scratch. Pretty much. I mean, obviously, occasionally there'll be a package of this or that thrown in somewhere. But I do my best to try to always cook all my meals from scratch because it's more frugal. And when you know how to cook from scratch, it is as one of you guys, Adrienne, said to me the other day. She said it is a gift and a blessing. And it is so true, because you can take a small amount of ingredients and turn them into many, many, many different meals. So I tried to hone in on baking and protein and a few carbs. So, when of course the baking would be considered the carbs. But okay, so here it is. Number 1 on my list is flour. I think that, you know, with flour you can make all kinds of things. Number 2 was baking powder. Okay, number 3 is sugar. And yes, this is the next day and I am editing, and I realized that I put the wrong thing down for number 3 because I had made a couple changes in my list as I was figuring it out. But hey, we all need some sweetness in life, right? So number 3 is sugar, and now let's get moving back to the rest of it. that combination. You can create muffins, you can create biscuits, create, you know, all kinds of baked goods. I should mention that this is not an extensive list. I will link to another video that I have that has a much more extensive list if that's what you're looking for. And I also, on that video, give a link to a printable list of all those items as well. I was just like 10 must-have items. If you wanted to go to the grocery store and say, okay, I'm going to buy these 10 items to have on my shelf, and maybe have some extra of that in case things got bad, in case we got snowed in or whatnot, then these would be the top 10 in my list, at least. So the next one is milk. So either powdered milk, shelf-stable like almond milk or soy milk or something like that that you could use, or canned milk. And you probably saw in my video there, you can take a can of canned milk and dilute it by half, and it equals the consistency of whole milk. And then at that point, you can use it in all your cooking. Powdered milk is good too, but powdered milk eventually will go bad. So depending on how often you rotate it and how often you use it, I typically store it in the freezer. So therefore, it wouldn't be necessarily a shelf-stable pantry item. Number 5 for me is oil. Okay, some sort of fat. So you need that for baking, you need that for good healthy functioning of your body. The best, in my opinion, shelf-stable, versatile, most versatile type of oil is coconut oil. It will last a long time on your shelf, and it will be, you can melt it down. I do that in recipes all the time, like this particular recipe. I melted it in the microwave and use that in place of vegetable oil. So any kind of recipe that calls for vegetable oil, you can use it. You can replace it for butter. You can replace it for shortening most of the time. So I think it's a really good versatile oil to have and very shelf stable. Number 6 for me is tomato paste or diced tomatoes. I kind of tend to move towards the diced tomatoes, although this was really difficult. I don't buy tomato sauce, generally speaking, because I tend to just buy tomato paste, and that can be added water to it, a little salt, and you can dilute it down to the consistency of tomato sauce. But diced tomatoes are great to add to soups and stews and things like that. And if you needed a liquid form of tomatoes, many times I've taken my can of diced tomatoes and put them in my blender and blended them up. The next one kind of moves into the grain category, and that is rice. Now, I was kind of a toss-up. Do I do rice or would I do pasta? And I really think that I would do rice. Rice is economical, it is very shelf-stable, and a little bit goes a long ways because you cook it up and it expands in size. The other grain that I would keep on hand all the time is oats. It works great for breakfast, oatmeal or granola or anything like that. So oats and rice would be the grains that I would choose. The last two are going to be proteins. So the 2 proteins that I would keep that I think are the best shelf-stable proteins. Number 9 is beans. If I had to narrow it down and just choose one type of bean, it would definitely be pinto beans. They are the most mild and the most versatile in my opinion. Normally I keep pinto beans, red beans, black beans, white beans or navy beans, and garbanzo beans. That's usually my bean list that I work from. But if I had to narrow it down to one, it would be pinto beans. And number 10, the last one, is peanut butter. So I think peanut butter is a great protein to have on hand and very shelf stable. If you buy the protein that's hydrogenated, of course it doesn't need to be refrigerated when you're after you open it. The other type does, so that's your call. But peanut butter makes a great protein to have on the shelf. Okay, that's my list of 10 items that I would pick. If I had to narrow it all down, those would be the ones that I would pick. Okay, I did not quite get 2 dozen out of that. I'm not sure why, but oh well. They're going to be delicious. They smell amazing. Can't wait to take a break and have one here soon. Anyway, let's move on to spices now. So, my top 10 spices, because let's face it, when you cook from scratch, if you don't have spices, your food isn't going to be very bland and so I just put spices in a whole different category. And the top 10 spices that I have, number one is obviously salt. You can get by with a whole lot less spices in many other areas, but salt is an absolute must. Number two is pepper. You know, they kind of go hand in hand, but I kind of feel like pepper is, you know, it's borderline. Do you have to have pepper? I don't know. I mean, I add it to things all the time. Does it really make a big difference? I don't know. You tell me. Number three is garlic. And so I buy granulated garlic from Costco, and we love garlic, and I throw it in just about everything that I cook. The other one that I think is important, and I actually don't have it on my shelf, and it is something I am going to pick up on my next shopping trip, is powdered bouillon. Now, I typically use better than bouillon, but that is refrigerated, and I am on this list trying to narrow it down to those shelf-stable items. So a jar of bulk, not the little cubes, but just a bulk thing of powdered bouillon, I think is a good thing to have on your pantry. Number five is an all-purpose seasoning salt. I use Johnny's seasoning salt that I get from Costco. There's Lawry's, there's all kinds of other brands out there, but that kind of just adds a little extra punch sometimes when your soup just isn't quite tasting right. Throw in a little seasoning salt. It's got a bunch of other different things in it. That can actually be very beneficial to your from-scratch cooking. Number six is chili powder. I use it in a lot of things that I cook. So obviously chili and enchiladas, Mexican type food. The other one is cumin, and it's because I do the same thing. Cumin goes into my chili, it goes into my enchiladas, Mexican foods. Number eight is taco seasoning that you buy in bulk. The other thing would be to have the ingredients on hand to make that yourself. I don't do that. I usually just buy a big container from Costco. Now, number nine is Italian seasonings. The basil, the oregano, the rosemary, all those things all combined in their right quantities. And I use that pretty much, anytime that a recipe might call for a half a teaspoon of basil or a half a teaspoon of rosemary, I just now throw in Italian seasoning because it is kind of like the all-purpose herb type seasoning in my mind. And so I don't keep a whole lot of those individual type of herbs on hand, but I do keep the Italian seasoning. And number 10 is cinnamon, because if you're doing some baking, cinnamon is nice to have. And then as I started thinking about my list, I did not have anywhere in there that I put vanilla. So in reality, it's not necessarily a spice, as in dry, but I kind of think that if I was to make any kind of an exchange on this top 10 list, I would probably take out pepper and add vanilla. Okay, you guys, those are my top 10s. Top 10 pantry items, top 10 spices. Now, I would love to hear yours. What would you change in my list? What is your list? Everybody cooks different. Everybody has different preferences on seasonings and things like that. And I would love to know what is your top 10 in each of those groups. It's kind of good food for thought, and it is also something that, it's important as homemakers to have a well-stocked pantry. And this is a good starting point, a good jumping off point. If you don't have a pantry that's stocked well, or you don't know what you would hone in on to get, well, these are some of my suggestions on what to put on your pantry shelves. All right, you guys, I really appreciate you being here today, and thank you for watching my video. And don't forget to give this a like if you enjoyed it, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel and you like my content, would you consider subscribing? I would appreciate that a lot. All right, I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.